Thank you for coming out today. We wanted to thank everybody that made to this talk. We're here today to inspire you to change the world through activism, especially through nonviolent forms of direct action. In this talk, we will have a debate, an exchange of ideas, and an opportunity to learn from each other. So how many people in here would consider themselves activists? Raise your hand. Great. Oh, awesome. Thank you for being an activist. And for those of you who are not activists yet, we hope that after this talk, you can pursue this path of activism. So we would like to start today's talk with a pretty bold question and statements. Let's go to our first slide. How wonderful would it be if all we had to do to abolish the wrongs in our world was not to commit those wrongs ourselves in the first place? So want to end sexism? Don't be a sexist. Want to end racism? Don't be a racist. Want to end speciesism? Go vegan. That would be quite fantastic. Unfortunately, when it comes to the abolition of systemic inequality and oppression, this is only achievable through our engagement in promoting actions that works towards eradicating them. So you might be asking yourselves now, so you're saying that veganism is not enough? We are proposing that we think beyond veganism and start thinking activism, more specifically anti-speciesist activism. For example, I'd like to share this meme with you folks that we did at Collectively Free. In this meme you can see there's a cow. It's a very strong image. It speaks for itself. Instead of saying just simply, I need your help, go vegan, and we're just saying, we're bringing it to the next level. We're highlighting the individuality of this cow. We're saying things like, I am not property, I am someone and I need your help. And the way that you can help it is through activism, through engaging yourself in a community that works towards the rights of non-human animals. We see veganism as a rejection of speciesism and as steps towards the right direction. However, veganism by definition is the non-participation in animal exploitation. And what the animals need is our active anti-speciesist participation in this movement. I would like to share a quote with you from this amazing article called From Species in Class. It's an article on veganism and consumerism. And it reads, "The current animal movement revolves around vegan consumption practices rather than on anti-speciesist politics. And this consumerist focus serves to uphold the very structure that commodify all beings. Though unevenly, of course, for example, capitalism commodifies black and brown bodies significantly more than it does white bodies, trans body more than it does cis bodies, etc. In short, while we acknowledge that we should, as individuals, embrace veganism, as a movement, we should focus on anti-speciesist messaging. In other words, the animals rather than on consumer goods." So what is activism? Let's talk a little bit about that now. Activism is a very laborious and vigorous campaigning to bring political and social change. And it is a lot of work, indeed. It is not passive, it is passionate and defined. Activism comes in so many shapes and sizes, so many actually that we have called liking a status or page or sharing a post on Facebook activism. So you're saying that posting on Facebook isn't good enough, not even talking to my coworkers about it. Every effort counts, absolutely. And we are not here to try to discredit your efforts and all the methods that we can get. We acknowledge that many people sometimes aren't able to come to actions. For example, perhaps they have a disability or life's just busy, it's hard for you to get to and from the event. Perhaps you can even afford to do so, right? So we do acknowledge all those things that can come into play. And we recognize the importance of online activism as well. However, when you bring speciesism to a collective by being part of an action, you engage more people and challenge the culture rather than the individual.
So where do animal rights fit into all this? animal rights are also political issues and social justice issues. Through a well-studied field of psychology, mentioned by Professor Wilkinwiga, we can see experimentally how animal rights intertwines with human rights. In one particular experiment, they divided people into two groups. One group got a news report which focused on the human superiority to animals, while the other group got a news report that focused on the continuity between human and animals. Then they were asked a series of questions about what they thought about single mothers, gay people, people of color, and those that got the news report about the discontinuity between humans and animals were much more likely to dehumanize minorities, whereas the ones that got the report about the continuity and who got the sense they care more about animals were much less likely to dehumanize those minorities. So experiments like this can only reinforce the need for a solid animal rights movement. It not only benefits the oppressed, but it also helps humans to be more caring of our own minorities. Animal rights activism, as we know it today, can range tremendously in strategies, from lobbying for legislative change to litigation, to community events, to education programs, to changing consumer habits, to challenging the culture of speciesism. We are most interested in changing the culture of speciesism and shaping new ideas, and that, we believe, is best obtained through creative, nonviolent, direct action. One of the most powerful examples of recent political and social activism we can find is the campaign Black Lives Matter. It is also a great example of nonviolent direct action. Black Lives Matter challenged the everyday routine and expectations with demand for justice. They challenged the norms and the status quo when they refused to remain silent before injustice and violence. They brought their voices to the streets, to stores, and to restaurants. "We want you to hear us," they said, loud and clear. And the same can be said about other social justice movements. Would we have listened if Gandhi or Pankhurst had been passing out leaflets and just educating the public? Would the media have paid attention if Black Lives Matter had only been tweeting or Facebooking? The short answer is no, and here's why. Let's take a look at some historic examples of direct action, starting with the independence movement. A testament to the revolutionary power of nonviolence, Gandhi's approach reshaped the existing Indian National Congress into a mass movement, promoting Indian self-rule through a series of nonviolent civil disobediences, which led to the arrest of thousands of people and eventually to India's independence from Britain. The civil rights movement, as a movement characterized by major campaigns of civil resistance. Between 1955 and 1968, acts of nonviolent protest and civil disobedience breathed crisis situations and productive dialogues between activists and government authorities. Forms of protests and or civil disobedience included boycotts, such as the Montgomery bus boycott, sit-ins, such as the successful and influential Greensboro sit-ins, and marches, such as Selma to Montgomery marches, as well as a wide range of other nonviolent activities. And it was through a series of nonviolent direct action that the Civil Rights Act of 1968 was instituted. Movements are often at their most brilliant when they turn a liability into an asset. The LGBTQ movement stands out when it comes to sheer variety of tactics. Queer activists go beyond stock repertoire of rallies and marches. Gene Sharp, in his list of 198 methods of nonviolent action, includes social disobedience. For decades, LGBTQ folks have been staging collective kiss-ins or simply acting out as couples publicly or holding hands. There's a very interesting podcast on how gay became okay from Britain. A few key points in this talk are how back in 1993, just over 60% of people said that sexual relations between two adults of the same sex was always wrong. Now, that figure is just over 20%. So that's 1 out of 5 people who changed their mind. That is a massive shift. All throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, quiet, patient, traditional, loving, that was a total failure in activism. It was only when we began to shake up the establishment that they began to sit up and take notice. So are we ready to bring social change for the trillions of non-human animals through provocative, creative, non-violent direct action? So remember when we said that when we bring speciesism to the collective by being a part of an action, we engage more people and challenge the culture rather than the individual? So we would like to show some scientific evidence in addition to the historical one. Sociologist and philosopher Renata Salecci asked us a bold question. Could individual choices be distracting us from something bigger, our power as social thinkers? In today's time of post-industrial capitalism, choice, together with individual freedom and the idea of self-making, has been elevated to an ideal. Now, together with this, we also have a belief in endless progress. Sadly, this ideology of individual choice has prevented us from thinking about social changes. It appears that this ideology was actually very efficient in pacifying us as political and social thinkers. Instead of making social critiques, we are more and more engaging in self-critique, sometimes to the point of self-destruction. Duncan Watts is a mathematical sociologist whose work has been targeted towards the study of networks. He's the person behind many studies and experiments which have been published in top scientific journals. What Watts and what other social scientists have found is that when it comes to social change, individual components often don't matter at all. What matters is the structure of the entire network. It's the interaction between people in the structure. In one of the many studies conducted, scientists wanted to know, could inequality and unpredictability be explained by social influence? Why is one movie a blockbuster when another is not? Is it based on quality or could it be manufactured? The results. 1, people rely on each other to determine quality. And 2, people want to see, read, listen to the same things as their friends. So with this one experiment, scientists created a lab online through Music Lab. The people came to the site, answered some questions about themselves, and then they were asked questions about 48 bands they'd never heard of. They divided the group of people into 2 worlds, the social world and the non-social world. In the social world, users saw the number of previous downloads for the songs. In the non-social world, users could only see the name of the band and the songs. So the results, in the non-social world, people seem to like all the songs evenly. In the social world, however, when a song received a high download, all of a sudden other users rushed and downloaded that song themselves. Individuals are influenced by their own observations of the choices of others. The stronger the social signal, the more they're influenced. Collective decisions are also influenced. The popular songs got more popular, and the less popular songs got less popular. Collective change spread fast. And change is driven by networks, not individuals. So now imagine what the animal rights movement can achieve if we applied this knowledge to abolishing the culture of speciesism. Imagine the day when no one would be able to go about their day without being reminded of the violent screams and sufferings of trillions of animals. Yes, we can imagine that day, and that is precisely why we focus on direct action.
So why direct action in the animal rights movement? I'd like to start by quoting Naomi Wolf. If you don't know who Naomi Wolf is, I highly recommend you find out who this amazing woman is. She's the lead spokeswoman of what is described as the third wave of the feminist movement. And she says, for protests to do anything, it has to disrupt business as usual. So let's start with that premise. Let's take a look at our module at Collectively Free in terms of our activism, how we implement direct action. we are focused on creating activists and not consumers. Changing consumer habits, as we've seen, may seem practical and probably the most natural thing to do, but it is not enough, as it only affects the individual and does not offer a bigger picture change. By creating more activists, however, we encourage more dialogue, more learning, and more open-mindedness. We also like to inspire and not just educate. We can probably think of a teacher from high school, perhaps, that we remember a lot. And why do we remember that particular teacher and not all the other 10 ones that we had? Probably because that teacher really inspired us, right? That teacher pushed us to think beyond, demanded more from us, like really inspire us to push forward. And this is what we try to do at Collectively Free, from everything we create, from memes to actions, events, panel discussions, and so on. Unite, collectively we are free. Large-scale change can only happen through a collective, through the uniting of not only individuals, but of groups as well. There are many animal rights groups out there in New York alone. There are hundreds to choose from, but rarely do we see them forming coalitions. And while each group is important, and while each of them bring their unique perspective to the issue, ultimately our goal is the same, which is animal liberation. So we acknowledge that people's triggers are different. What prompted me to go vegan is probably not the same thing that prompted you to go vegan. So it's important to try all sort of tactics in order to reach all sorts of people. Yet we must also acknowledge each other's contribution and allow ourselves to join forces and organize collective actions. This is a picture of us at Starbucks on our first day of our long campaign against them. We also focus on ideas, so we like to focus on values and not behaviors. We're all born with a love for humans and non-human animals. Maybe there are a few exceptions out there, but for the most part, I think it's safe to say that we all were born with that love. None of us were born believing that others are inferior to us, that we need to consume non-human bodies and their secretions to be healthy and live happily ever after. These are things that we have learned from our social networks, from parents, from institutions such as educational institutions, and from the media, the government. So we have adapted our behavior to them. Seeing through our behavior and into our values will allow us to dismantle these beliefs and unlearn the injustice. We all carry the same values, but we must see and appreciate them in order to really live through them. Focus on culture and not economics. As we said earlier, creating consumers should not be the goal of our movement, because it would only shift the focus from the bigger picture of oppression and why we practice it to ourselves and to our physical needs. We want culture to affect economic, and it will, and not the other way around as it is right now. This is a picture of our disruption at Nathan's hot dog eating contest, which was pretty successful. We also like to disrupt, to provoke and confront, to shape ideas, use anger, outrage to inspire others to join. We all get angry sometimes. In New York, we particularly get angry at the MTA because they made us late. We get angry at the person in line because they decide to cut it, and so on and so on. It's in our nature to get angry, and it's okay. And there are probably 3 ways of trying to deal with that. Right? We can channel our anger in form of violence. We can try to suppress our anger, or we can channel our anger in form of a positive outcome. So we definitely recommend the last option, and that's what we try to do when we do our actions. We try to really channel that anger into something positive. If you think of, for me, for example, when I first went vegan, I was very angry at everything and everybody. And, I used to say things that I definitely regret now, because I didn't know how to deal with all that dark information that I had. It was just like too much for me to handle. So I didn't know exactly how to deal with it. And now, thankfully, I know how to just channel it in a way that is positive and that can actually inspire other people to cause change. And direct action doesn't produce instant gratification. I think this is probably one of our biggest obstacles in trying to dismantle this idea, that people watch videos and they say, hey, those people out there, they didn't get up and decide to hold a sign with you, or I saw those people laughing out there, or, you must be doing something wrong because it's clearly not working. Well, let me bring another perspective to this issue. Show these pictures over here. We have Rosa Parks. When Rosa Parks sat in that bus, everyone was outraged. According to Douglas Brinkley's 2000 Rosa Parks biography, the following was the exchange between her and the bus driver, and I quote, "Are you going to stand up?" the driver demanded. Rosa Parks looked straight at him and said, "No." Flustered and not quite sure what to do, Blake retorted, "Well, I'm going to have you arrested." And Parks, still sitting next to the window, replied softly, "You may do that." Of course, she was arrested. Well, let's get to Emmeline Pankhurst. She first started gathering women. She would just stand up in a box in the middle of the street and ask women to join her in the fight for women's right to vote. She was ridiculed, even by some women themselves. And when the suffragette movement started, and when they disrupted meetings at the Liberal Party shouting, "Votes for women!" they were laughed at, they were mocked, and arrested. But the actions of both these revolutionary women shaped new ideas in an oppressive culture. And that's what we're trying to do for animals. Unite, Act, Transform is CF's mantra, I should say. When we come together, our actions transform our society and shape new ideas. So I would like to share with you a video about our 1-year anniversary, and we'll touch base after that. So I hope you enjoyed the video and you were able to get inspired a little bit and find out and understand a little bit more about what we do in Collectively Free. So why Collectively Free? There are 3 important points that I think can be distinguishing points about our group. We would like to think of ourselves as innovative and inspirational, so we're always really looking for better and more creative ways for activism. And we fuel our community with inspiration, so we're definitely always looking at other animal rights groups, what they're doing, and not just in the US, obviously, but in places like Europe and South America, Central America, and so on. Any place is a place that we can definitely learn from. We also like to think of ourselves as provocative and experimental. We're not afraid of pushing boundaries and experimenting. In our journey, there will be successes and mistakes, and it's very, very important to not be afraid of making mistakes. And when you do make them, obviously, do your best to, apologize and scroll from it and be really critical about these mistakes and how you can do better next time. We're also communal and active, so if you're with us, you will definitely be part of an inclusive community of activists. At this point, I think you may be saying to yourselves, hey, look, all this sounds great, but how do you plan on transforming society's most ingrained wrongs? Well, through a combination of principles and methods, some of which we have already covered, but I would like to cover some more with you. We are a relatively new group. We started in September 2014, so about a year ago. But since then, we definitely have not stopped challenging speciesism and offering solutions. So from disruptions to screening to projections to education, we have definitely inspired a lot of activists, and we have reached to other countries and cities as well. On our mission, it says we are Collectively Free is an activist community that works towards total animal liberation through interspecies messaging, highly creative, nonviolent actions, and pro-intersectional, empowering community building. I'd like to share our 6 organizing principles. I think they're pretty straightforward. First one is total animal liberation. Our ultimate goal is total animal liberation. Every non-human animal has the right to live free and without being an object of harm or exploitation. Number 2 is community. Social change will only grow around a strong core community. As individuals, our actions can only influence other individuals and only change behavior, but as community, we can begin to change culture and shape new ideas. Intersectionality. Diversity in our movement is key, and CF strives to be as intersectional and inclusive as possible in every action and every material we put out. Human or non-human, it is not our characteristics that makes us better. To be truly free from oppression, we must stop all of its forms. And here are 2 pictures of us, the Pride Parade in New York, where we had a beautiful campaign and video that went viral, came out of it, which I'm really glad that so many people had the opportunity to share their experience with us. And the other picture is our campaign against Starbucks, which highlights the oppression of human animals and non-human animals. In this case, we're talking about the conditions of coffee workers in Ethiopia, which is the largest coffee exporter and the ones that Starbucks buys from a lot. So, point 4 is activism and veganism. As we said, we acknowledge veganism as a step towards the rejection of speciesism and the elimination of animal use, but it is not an end in itself. In order to achieve total animal liberation, we must unite to speak up for the non-human animals through highly creative, nonviolent activism. Number 5 is the stories of non-human animals. Just because we don't understand the language of non-human animals doesn't mean that they don't have stories to tell. CF features the animals and their stories as a way of decommodifying their image. Number 6, of course, inspiration. The success of our movement depends upon always keeping the momentum, always growing, and always looking at the bigger picture ahead. When we inspire others, we get inspired in return, and this drives us forward. Inspiration is the spark that brought us all here. It is the spark that we should strive to ignite in others. Here a few list of things that we do, actions and events. I'm just going to run through them really quickly. It's start with direct action, nonviolent direct action, which is obviously inspired by the 50s and 60s sit-ins. They are short, they last 3 to 4 minutes. We come deliver to speak out. Inside the establishment, we're out. We always do our leafleting and outreach afterwards to maximize our efforts. We have intersectional campaigns. Intersectionality is the idea that we cannot think of systemic oppressions such as the ones with gender, race, class, ability, sexual orientation, species, immigration status, etc., as separate and independent from one another. We carefully and critically apply this concept to our campaigns. And this is something we're starting to explore a lot now, finally, that we have the opportunity to do. And when we first started, this was, one of our big dreams. And I think now that we have a solid structure, we can definitely devote more time to doing it. And I think it's imperative if we really want to grow our movement, and because it's the right thing to do. We have theatrical demonstrations, which are typically in public spaces. We definitely see theater as a very important tool for activists. It gives us that chance of introducing play to our activism, and it sort of puts everybody on the same level. There isn't that dynamics anymore of the, I am the activist and I am the non-activist and I have to fight you and you have to fight me, I have to defend myself. So like theater has this really good way of putting everybody on the same level that we like to explore. So it's fun, and it's also attention grabbing. We have a project called Projections Towards Compassion, which is a form of outreach, sort of like a guerrilla creative form of projecting content of everyday animal, abuse and violence. Sometimes we do other types of videos where we have animals as they should be split on the screen, and animals being, tortured and violent, so people can compare and contrast how they should look like and how they're treated. And so it's always good. It's very attention grabbing, and we always engage with people. And I would say it's a favorite of everybody in our community. We also have screenings, so obviously movies are a great opportunity for community building and for education and making us better activists and connecting with more activists. Coalition building, definitely super important, like we mentioned before. We really think it's important to unite with other groups, and that's just only gonna make our movement grow bigger and better. So let's forget our differences and go for the goal of animal liberation. We also hold open meetings, which is, it's basically a CF's organizing meeting. We invited members of our extended family and we discuss our campaigns, strategies, news. We empower activists and hopefully, usually we'd like to have food when possible. And it's just a great way of community building as well. Panel discussions as well. So it's a little different than the open meetings. It's more an in-depth discussion about a certain theme, and we'll have a few speakers that will debate that, and then we open to Q&A. We like to do those. They're more targeted to intersectional issues. So say how LGBTQ rights intersects with animal rights, or how racism intersects with animal rights, or sexism, etc., etc. We also did an educational program. We organized a Vegan Pledge program, which was a 30-day mentoring program, guiding new vegans through their transition, and it was a great community building, project. We got a few activists out of it, which is really cool. One of them in particular, which I'm really proud of. She's been an amazing activist, so definitely a very good program to have. So what's next for you? You hope you can join us in our fight for animal liberation. And yes, we need to be vegan, but if we truly oppose oppression in all of its forms, we also need to act. We don't just need more vegans, we need more vegan activists, speaking out and acting out against injustice and against the cultural norm that allows for this injustice to happen. The more activists there are, the more visible our movement will be, and the more effective. So please, if you haven't already, join us. Together we can really make an impact and make the world a better place for animals. Thank you, everybody.